Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to discuss, obviously, the number one issue in this campaign, the number one issue here in the state of Michigan, which is the health and state of our economy and what we can do in Washington, D.C., I would put it, to create an atmosphere for our economy to grow, the private sector to grow. Here in Michigan, you've been through a lot of tough times. We all know that, and it's exciting to see the resurgence of the auto industry here. But over the last 4 years, Michigan's lost over 140,000 jobs. 250,000 people from Michigan have left the workforce, and the unemployment rate is, unfortunately, still higher than the national average. So if you were to ask the question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, to many people in the state, the answer would still be no. We do need a strong economic platform by which to help the private sector successfully compete and to create the kind of jobs that are going to provide for families and grow this economy till we can create the prosperity that this city was known for decades. I'm going to lay out very quickly my economic plan. And you're going to hear this and you're going to say, well, that's pretty similar to other economic plans that you heard from Republicans. But let me do that first, and then let me tell you how, well, we're just a little different than some of the others in this race, and how we approach the issue of creating an opportunity where everyone in America can rise, and we can create a healthier, not just economy, but a healthier country. Well, first, I do believe in pro-growth economics. I'm a supply-side economics person. I believe in lower rates. I believe in simplification. When it comes to the corporate tax is, well, as of April, will be the highest in the world. I cut that corporate tax in our plan to 17.5% and make it basically a net profits tax. Simple, a flat tax. With one exception, I still believe that we need to encourage innovations in the knowledge-based economy, so we have a 20% permanent tax credit for research and development in the corporate tax. Secondly, dividends, interest, capital gains, a 20% cut from 15% to 12%. We abolished the AMT. I abolished the death tax. I take the corporate tax. Again, simplification, lower rates. We have a 10% low rate, and we expand that lower rate. And then take all the other rates, consolidate it to one rate. 28% top rate, a 20% reduction from the 35% rate, down to 28%, which was Ronald Reagan's top rate. My feeling is, if it's good enough for Ronald Reagan, it's good enough for me. And so we have a top rate of 28%, and we have a simplified tax code. A simplified tax code, which I'll discuss in a minute, is not completely flat, but we have things there for a reason, to help promote strong and healthy society. I also believe in reducing the size of government. That's key. You can't just cut taxes and reduce as a result, in large part, some revenues to the federal government without creating a balance by reducing the size of government. And that's important, too, to remove the regulatory burden from the people of this country. So I've proposed $5 trillion in reductions over 5 years. Now, that can be funny math for a lot of folks in America. Well, is that $5 trillion from the baseline, or is that, how does that all work as to whether that's real reductions or not? What I've pledged is that we will spend less money every year than the year before, all 4 years, until we reach a balanced budget in 5 years. $5 trillion in 5 years, less spending each year, every year, and we will reach a balanced budget in 5 years. Now, I know you folks here in Michigan have been hearing some things on the television from one of my opponents that I am a big spender. You will find that rather surprising to the folks who are more my colleagues, and any objective look at my spending record when I was in Congress, and there was one just done yesterday by the Weekly Standard. The Weekly Standard looked at the 50 senators who were in the Congress at the same time I was there. And there were only 4 senators who had a better spending record, according to the National Taxpayers National Taxpayers Union. They rated me for all those years, and my rating was better than just everybody but 4. And those 4 folks happen to represent states like Oklahoma and Wyoming. They weren't representing a state like Pennsylvania or like Michigan, which hadn't elected a Republican for president since 1988. I was the most conservative, they put it. I was the most conservative senator by far based on the state I represented and the spending record I had. Any other person in a state with a similar electoral map that Pennsylvania I had to run in, the closest person to me was not even half as good in spending as I was. So I stood up in a tough state and stood for limited government, and particularly stood for something that was important if we're going to get the budget balanced. And as Tim mentioned, entitlement reform. Was the author of the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. I managed the bill on the floor of the Senate. If we're going to solve the problems of this country when it comes to getting deficits under control, we have to look at, as we all know, we got to look at where the money is. And the money is in entitlements. 60% of the budget right now is entitlements. Defense used to be 60% of the budget. When I was born, it was 60% of the budget. It's now 17% of the budget. Those who believe that defense is causing the budget problems simply don't know the math. The math is that when I was born, entitlements were less than 10% of the budget. That is the area of growth, and entitlements will completely consume all revenues in just a handful of years. Because why? Because most of the entitlements, unfortunately, are targeted toward those on the margins of life, which happen to be the disabled, but more particularly the elderly. And we see the baby boom generation beginning to retire, and all bets are off as to whether we'll be able to afford this explosion of benefits. Well, I was out there talking about this problem back when it wasn't popular to talk about it, and proposed reforms of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. I led the charge on welfare reform, and we need to use the same thing we did on welfare reform, which is cap it, cut it, freeze it, block grant it to the states for Medicaid, for food stamps, a whole host of other means-tested entitlement programs that are already run by the states, and give them the flexibility to be able to go out and design programs that meet the needs of their particular constituencies. We did that with welfare, and we cut the welfare rolls by 50%. We did that at a time when welfare rolls were the highest level ever, just like food stamps are at the highest level ever. And guess what happened? Poverty rates went down. People went to work. Why? Because we put time limits and we put work requirements on receiving government benefits. We do those things again. We can help turn this economy around. We hear all the time, I even hear it from manufacturers, we have a hard time finding workers. Well, when you have 99 weeks of unemployment benefits and you have a variety of other social safety net programs, people can make choices that they otherwise wouldn't make if the economy was not one that government dependency was the watchword. This president is not interested, in my opinion, in providing jobs. He's interested in providing benefits. He's interested in redistributing wealth and creating a dependency class which is a reliable voting group for him and those who want to pass out the redistributed wealth. The problem, as Margaret Thatcher is with redistribution of wealth and socialism, eventually you run out of other people's money. Well, we're not going to have a plan that's going to run out of other people's money. We're going to reduce the entitlement burden on this country. We're going to tackle Social Security and Medicare, and not 10 years from now. Now, I put forward plans unlike Paul Ryan, which I support, but we need to do it now. And I'm not going to go into all the details. It's a longer speech. But Social Security and Medicare reform, as I've talked about it, even in places like the Villages in Florida, which is basically a large, huge retirement community. And when I've talked about Social Security and actually changing benefits, I didn't see a single hand raised that opposed what I was proposing. Why? Because if you have a leader who's willing to go out and educate the American public as to the problems we confront and the possible solutions out there, you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how the American people will rally and do what's their duty and do what's necessary to make this country great again. We have a president who doesn't believe in that, believes in hiding the ball, pitting one group against another. I believe in informing Americans, lifting them up, making them participants in the problems we have, and turning those problems into opportunities for all Americans. So that's how, in some respects, we're the same. Let me tell you how we're different. See, I believe that we need to create an atmosphere for everyone to be able to rise in America. And just cutting taxes, supply side across the board, and reducing the size and scale of government, well, in my opinion, that's not enough. And in fact, if that's all we do, I'm confident we will not succeed. We won't succeed economically, and more importantly, we won't succeed culturally and socially. And ultimately, we'll be back where we were before with government taking the upper hand again. Why? Because, well, we won't have done the things that are necessary for people to rise in society and for society to be stable. Let me talk to you about how I believe that we need to have an economic plan that includes everybody. Tim mentioned the fact that we have manufacturing sector of the economy. When I was growing up, that was 21% of the workforce. It's now 9%. When I grew up in the steel town of western Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania, as he mentioned, my grandfather was a coal miner. I knew that was the wealth. It wasn't great wealth. It wasn't opulent wealth. But it was wealth that was sustaining of families and allowed folks to be able to participate in civic and community organizations and not having to work 2 or 3 jobs. They could participate in the health of their community, which was vital for the health of our country. And so manufacturing to me is a key to that. President Obama is all about equality of result. I'm about equality of opportunity. I'm not about equality of result when it comes to income inequality. There is income inequality in America. There always has been. And hopefully, and I do say that, there always will be. Why? Because people rise to different levels of success based on what they contribute to society and to the marketplace. And that's as it should be. And we shouldn't have a society that has a president who envies or creates class warfare or envy between one group of people and another. We should celebrate like we do in the small towns all across America, as you do here in Detroit. You celebrate success. You build statues and monuments, buildings you name after them. Why? Because in their greatness and innovation, yes, they created wealth, but they created wealth for everybody else. And that's a good thing, not something to be condemned in America. Well, we also need to create that opportunity for people to rise. And I believe manufacturing is the key to that. People say, well, why do you create manufacturing different? And I do. I don't cut the corporate rate for manufacturers to 17.5%. We eliminate the corporate tax for manufacturers. There will be no tax, period. We create the opportunity for us to compete. Say, well, why do you treat it differently? Well, because you here in Detroit have to compete against countries all around the world who want your jobs and in many cases took your jobs. And so we need to have a plan in place in America that understands the competitive playing field that you're on. We're not going to move the bank overseas. We're not going to move the retailer overseas. All of those other folks compete internally by and large. You don't. No manufacturer really competes internally or just internally. You compete with a world that wants what you have because they know that manufacturing, making things, is the key to wealth creation in any society. And so we have to, just like we do, and we've had policies in the past, to make sure that we have a military-industrial complex in this country. Why? Because of our national security. We make sure that we have a stable food policy in America. Why? Because of our national security. We need to have a manufacturing base in this economy. Why? Because of our national security. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a hostile world, and we need to make sure that we are relying upon ourselves. And that means we need to create a marketplace where we can compete with everybody around the world. No advantages, just level playing field. Right now, American manufacturers have a 20% cost differential disadvantage, and that's excluding labor costs with our 9 top trading partners. That, of course, includes Canada, Mexico, China. And we need to level that playing field. Why is it higher? Well, because of government taxes and regulations. Well, if that's the problem, then government has a responsibility to create an opportunity for you to go out and compete on that level playing field. Well, that's why I've zeroed out the corporate tax and have said to those of you who have sent jobs overseas, if you take that money back, instead of paying the tax that you have to pay when you repatriate profits, that if you invest that money in plant and equipment, you will pay no tax. If you invest it in plant and equipment and create jobs here in America. Those are 2 things that we can do to create the opportunity for profitability as well as the availability of capital to invest here to create the jobs of the future. So that's one big area, but there's other things we can do. I hear, obviously with the future leader of China here in America today, we hear a lot about China. We hear a lot about what we have to do to compete with China. Well, what I've just laid out will compete with China. We'll compete with any country in the world. I know folks are concerned about currencies. I'm concerned about it too. Government should not set currencies. Markets should set currency values. And that includes the United States of America, I might add. If we're going to point the finger at other countries, then we need to look at what we do here in America when it comes to currencies and what we're doing with the value of the dollar in this country. Let's have the market do it. And if you do, I am confident that the American worker and American companies can compete with anybody around the world. The other thing that is key in making us competitive is energy. Energy is key to manufacturing. Obviously, you're great users of it, but it's also a key to the entire prosperity of our country. If you look at any map, any graph that shows the cost of energy and the availability of energy, and you look at it relative to the standard of living of that country, the lower the energy cost and the more available the energy, the higher the standard of living. If you look at the recession that we went into it in 2008. Why? Because of a huge spike in energy prices. Now you read on the front page of the paper, energy prices going up again, and now this headwind to a growing economy as we've seen repeatedly as this economy has tried to recover. And yet we have vast resources of energy in this country. And we have a president who's doing everything he can to see the oil and gas, coal in this country as a liability, not an asset. Something that should be kept in the ground to protect you instead of taken out of the ground to enrich you. Yesterday I was in North Dakota. For those of you who may not be close, this may look like a lump of coal. It's not a lump of coal. It's oil. This is oil. This is how we get oil in North Dakota. We fracture this piece of rock, and this piece of rock has oil floating around in it. Whether you believe it or not, I have a hard time believing it. But they've handed me the oil, so I guess I can believe it. We have something called hydraulic fracturing that is being used. We've had hundreds of thousands of wells that have used it over the course of time, and now we're using horizontal drilling with hydraulic fracturing, and we're producing an energy boom. I was just at one of the wells, and they told me in Tioga, North Dakota, that their light sweet crude, which is a premium commodity on the market, sells at a discount of $32. Why? Because they can't get it to market. And we have a president of the United States with this knowledge, that Mexico within 5 years will be an energy importer, not exporter. That's 1.5 million barrels a day. Venezuela, which we get 2.5 million barrels a day from, is going from an energy exporter to the United States to have China build a refinery there and have their product go to China. 2.5 million barrels lost to the United States. Alaska. I want to open up Alaska for the Alaska Wildlife Refuge to create more opportunities for us to extract oil from the North Slope of Alaska. It used to produce 2 million barrels a day. It's down to 500,000, and within a few years, it will be down to the point where the pipeline won't work anymore because there's not enough flow to move the oil. So within less than 10 years, we will lose 5 million barrels of oils a day. And the President of the United States said no to a pipeline that would bring that oil down from Canada and North Dakota, allow our people in our states to get the price for their crude, to take 500 trucks a day off the roads in these little communities and create thousands of jobs. And the President of the United States said no. No, send that oil to China, which is what Canada will do if we don't build that pipeline. This is a president who is suffocating this economy. This is a president who doesn't care about you and the cost of living that you have to deal with. They'd rather tell the auto companies here to increase their CAFE standards and build cars that will essentially be less safe for you to drive, instead of building pipelines and creating oil and opportunities in this country so we can drive cars that our families want to and that are safe for us. This is the big difference. We're going to create jobs for everybody in America. Energy jobs, I was out there. They're jobs for everybody, all skill levels. And they're good pay. The average job in western North Dakota, $90,000 a year. Goes a long way in Tioga, North Dakota. There's the opportunity for you, folks. That's what energy and manufacturing can do. Someone who has a message that says to all workers, let's get you to work. Let's improve the quality of life here. Let's reduce our energy costs. Let's make things here in America. And a president says, no, 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 and no. Let me increase food stamps. Let me provide a healthcare system where we take money from some and give it to others so we can then tell you you have a right to healthcare and then tell you how to exercise that right. That's the view of a president of the United States. It's not the view of a country that believes in free people and free markets. You know, even if we do all the things I've just suggested, and we don't do some other things to try to improve our economy. Father mentioned that we have to be concerned about those who are at the very margins of our society, the very poor. We have a president who says that he supports the occupiers who divide America between 99 and 1. We had another candidate in this race who suggested that he didn't care about the very poor. He cared about the 95%. How about a candidate who cares about 100%? Who cares about everybody and gives them the opportunity to be able to rise in society? Not just to do that with manufacturing and energy jobs, but also to understand that unless we have strong families and strong communities, we're not going to be an economically successful country. We certainly won't be able to have limited government, lower taxes, if the family continues to disintegrate. In America today, a single-parent family versus a two-parent family. As far as poverty rates, two-parent families in America have an 8% poverty rate in America. Single-parent families, as heroic as single moms are to provide, to care, to nurture, to do all the things that two parents were designed to do, the poverty rate is approaching 40%. We're not going to have a strong economy, folks, or limited government, if the family continues to decline. 30 years ago, 71% of people over the age of 18 were married in America. Today it's 51%, and it's dropped 5% in the last 3 years. It's a precipitous and rapid decline. And as that occurs, government will get bigger. And the ability for us to lower taxes and create a vibrant economy will get harder. I spoke with Chuck Colson, who started a group called Prison Fellowship after he left prison in the 1970s, and he told me that at the time he left prison, there were 250,000 people in prison in America. Today, there are 2.5 million people in prison in America, and 70 to 80% of them grew up without a father in the home. Now, let's just do the math and what America is going to look like, and you tell me how we can be economically successful. Folks, we as Republicans, we as conservatives, we can't go out there and just say cut spending, cut taxes, everybody's going to be fine. First off, economically, everybody isn't going to be fine. We need to create an environment where all people can rise. And we also have to create a culture that is consistent with the values of our country. Our country was a great country because we believed in building a great and just society from the bottom up, believing in freedom, faith, family, those media institutions that you may have read about in Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. We talked about all these little organizations at the grassroots level. Yes, first the family, second the church, the school, the little hospital, the civic and charitable organizations. What have we done? What's happened? As government has got bigger and more forceful, they are sweeping them out of the way. In my tax plan, I have 5 deductions. One is for families. We tripled the child tax credit or child deduction. Why? Because families are taxed higher now than they've ever been. Why? Because the child deduction continues to go down over time. Families back in the 1950s, in the heydays of Detroit, they didn't pay taxes. Why? Because we understood the stress of raising children and the economic stress and how finances and economics can be a stress on marriages and families. And so we had a government that says, we're going to support you. The other deductions that we have in place are for health care and for housing and for pensions, all things to help support and stabilize families. And of course, charities, churches, key to those mediating institutions. What do I mean by mediating? The institutions that stand between you and the government. If there isn't anything between you and the government, if there is a naked public square, if you are there alone with nobody around you, and you are out there paddling alone, then government becomes your lifeboat. And when government becomes your lifeboat, freedom is ultimately lost because you've now sold out. No fault of your own in many cases, but that's what's left. We need to create a rich society with lots of places for you to go before you go to the government for help and assistance in the problems that you're dealing with. Charities, churches. It's no wonder the president, in one of his tax proposals, sought to limit charitable contributions. They get in the way of government, you know, in providing for you. Families can get in the way of government and your reliance on them. No, we will have a program that will go out and say that we need to build a rich society again. Why has democracy and a republic form of government failed in so many places around the world? Because they didn't have what we have, which is a great civil society. Families, churches, community organizations, schools, and the business, small businesses, businesses generally, who are there to help mediate between you and the government. This is the vision, an economic vision for America that doesn't go back, but goes forward in creating opportunity and a culture that is nurturing and safe and secure. Because we've got that strong community. We've got the opportunity to rise in society. We'll put Americans back to work, and we'll put them to work in neighborhoods where they feel safe and can raise good and decent children and live lives that can make this country that shining city on the hill. Thank you. God bless.